Welcome to the AI Hustle Podcast, the podcast where we break down the latest in AI news, tools, and interview experts helping you hustle and do more using AI. If you've been following the podcast for a while, you'll know that over the last 6 months, I've been working on a stealth AI startup. Of the hundreds of projects I've covered, this is the one that I believe has the greatest potential. So today I'm excited to announce AI Box. AI Box is a no-code AI app building platform paired with the App Store for AI that lets you monetize your AI tools. The platform lets you build apps by linking together AI models like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and 11 Labs. Eventually, we'll integrate with software like Gmail, Trello, and Salesforce, so you can use AI to automate every function in your organization. To get notified when we launch and be one of the first to build on the platform, you can join the waitlist at aibox.ai. The link is in the show notes. We are currently raising a seed round of funding. If you're an investor that is focused on disruptive tech, I'd love to tell you more about the platform. You can reach out to me at jaden@aibox.ai. I'll leave that email in the show notes. There have recently been a number of very prominent venture capitalists and business leaders out of Europe who have signed an open letter, and essentially they're warning that over-regulation of AI in EU laws is going to stifle their ability to compete on the world stage in AI. Now, this is very interesting because Europe is one of the countries that has been taking a lot of really big initiatives into AI. They're currently working on drafting some AI regulation, and they're slated to, I think they've essentially created some proposals and some bills that they have, sort of approved, but then they have to go and get essentially voted on and talked about by a number of different countries. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see if that passes. Now, as that is kind of on the radar of a lot of different business professionals, there's a lot of different CEOs and VCs across Europe that have signed an open letter warning that this is actually going to be a little bit detrimental to their entire AI industry and their tech industry in general. So they had executives from over 150 businesses, including Germany's Siemens and France's Airbus. And they essentially just highlighted the risk of regulation, saying that these rules could essentially threaten the ability of companies in Europe to compete in AI. And also, essentially they're saying the legislation that's currently getting looked at and people are trying to pass is failing to deal with other potential challenges that AI faces. So in this letter, they essentially are trying to offer the chance to rejoin the technological avant-garde, and they're just worried that, they're essentially going to get stifled. So among a lot of other different European industry leaders, the letter also has a number of people that have signed it that are fairly prominent, including BlaBlaCar, which if you've been to Europe is a very massive company, Critero, Felix Capital, One Ragtime VC, YN Sect, Elay Partners, Minstrel AI, Get Your Guide, Ventec, WeFox, Atomic VC, and La Figmila VC. So there's 150 of these companies, but there's a lot of really prominent people. I mean, you have people from Airbus on here, and they're just, essentially they're just worried about this. So in the letter, this is what it says. It says, in our assessment, the draft legislation would jeopardize Europe's competitiveness and technological sovereignty without effectively tackling the challenges we are and will be facing. So the EU, all of this comes on the back of the EU, which has spent almost 10 years essentially working on draft proposals of what is now the Artificial Intelligence Act. And they've been working on what will serve as essentially the basis for negotiations between a number of different member states and the European Commission. But this could also make the jurisdiction, aka Europe, one of the hardest places in the world for AI companies and platforms to actually operate. And so I think the demands or people asking for regulation has definitely increased a lot in the last, number of months since ChatGPT launched. And this has fueled fears among some European governments. So we see cases like Italy, which just outright banned ChatGPT recently. I think they have brought it back. But one of the things that they cited was just, privacy and other issues. I think they were worried that Italian users' data was used to train ChatGPT, and, they didn't want that to be the case. They wanted that data to be removed from the model. They had a bunch of different demands and stuff. So I think this is going to be really interesting because you have an area like the EU with so many different member states, and all of them are they all are taking different approaches, right? So it's going to be interesting in the negotiations to see, who is in favor of what. But at the end of the day, it's going to be AI companies and, technological companies in general that are hurt the most by over-regulating something that is very new. So included in the signatures, we also have the car maker Renault and Heineken. And they're arguing that the proposed laws might heavily regulate foundational AI models, regardless of their use case, which obviously is not the intended goal. So the letter essentially is arguing that compliance is going to cost, and the liability risks could be disproportionate, which is going to force companies and investors to leave the EU in order to take advantage of all of this new AI tech that's coming out. And it's going to create a critical productivity gap with the US, right? EU does not want to get stuck in second place behind the United States when it comes to innovation and technology, as is, right? A lot of big companies are moving to America, moving to Silicon Valley to pursue, they see a lot of tech talent and kind of a hub where they're trying to, grab talent to build these great companies. And so that's one thing that everywhere in the world is fighting. But on top of that, if everywhere in the world is just outright banning different AI use cases, all of the companies in not very regulated places are going to have major advantages. And, the EU, of course, would like to avoid that. So they argue that the regulators need to create laws that are, limited to... Well, essentially, they're saying that these laws are limited to rigid compliance rather than to broad principles on a risk-based approach, meaning that Europe is going to be forced to essentially, quote unquote, stay on the sidelines in this whole new era of AI. And, we're seeing this AI come out of every single country. And so they definitely do not want to get left behind in this entire race to, create these powerful AIs. So the companies, essentially, they're calling for the formation of an EU regulatory body, which has industry experts in it, right? They would like people that are actually into the industry and know what's going on, that can monitor how laws are applied and also can, give their own perspectives on technological things. Now, some people would say this is a conflict of interest. We have the same issue here in the United States where essentially with, drug administrations like the FDA, people want industry experts to be in the FDA, but then people are worried about conflict of interest that we have to kind of sort through with, a company like Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson is developing vaccines, and, they're in the meetings with the FDA on approving vaccines or their efficacy or a whole number of different problems. It's very tricky to have industry experts, aka people high up in companies getting regulated at the same table with the regulators. It's difficult, right? And to make sure there's no conflicts of interest and the relationships there aren't, compromised. And so I think that's something we're going to have to grapple with one way or another. But at the same time, you don't want the opposite of that, where regulators are just making all of these rules and they don't actually understand the underlying technology because they've never been in the actual industry. So neither of those situations are ones that I think a lot of people want. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how we kind of strike a balance in that regard. So I will say that this letter in particular has been criticized by Dragos Tudorch, who is an MEP involved in drafting the laws, who said that, obviously these larger companies, he's just saying that larger companies are being lobbied by an aggressive few. He actually made a statement to TechCrunch, and a spokesperson for the letter, who is Jeanette zu Furstenberg of La Famiglia, said, "In all its complexity, the upcoming AI revolution will significantly shape the future of every continent. We have long been discussing the lack of technological leadership in Europe, and now it is the time to take action. We have come to the conclusion that the AI Act in its current form has catastrophic consequences for European competitiveness." Sorry, that was a spokesperson for this actual letter that has been drafted by the business professionals. So they said, "We are currently witnessing a lot of European talent give up leading positions at U.S. tech companies to develop European technology. The spirit of innovation is in jeopardy." So I think, we have seen a lot of people that are interested in working for U.S. companies, and a lot of people that are coming from U.S. companies back to Europe because, or wherever they're from, because they want to build technology that helps the ecosystem of where they're from. So I totally understand that. And it does make it difficult, right? So if one of these people, let's say they leave Google's DeepMind AI project to go start a company in Europe. They want to like go and help their local area. And then all of a sudden Europe starts, regulating what they're actually able to develop and create. That's going to really put pressure on them to just leave and go back to somewhere less regulated, which is the opposite of what, Europe and any other country is trying to do at this time. So I think it's really important to obviously look at what regulation looks like in AI, but I just think it's really important not to get to jump the gun and over-regulate such an industry that has such massive disruption potential before we really understand it fully and really understand what it is capable of doing. Especially, they're kind of accusing this of being an industry or an area where people are looking at regulating it from a very practical perspective instead of an ideological perspective. And so there's definitely a difference, and we're going to have to continue to look and follow up on how that continues to play into the future. If you are looking for an innovative and creative community of people using ChatGPT, you need to join our ChatGPT creators community. I'll drop a link in the description to this podcast. We'd love to see you there, where we share tips and tricks of what is working in ChatGPT. It's a lot easier than a podcast, as you can see screenshots, you can share and comment on things that are currently working. So if this sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the comment. We'd love to have you in the community. Thanks for tuning in to the AI Hustle podcast. If you could do us a massive favor, we would really, really appreciate it if you could leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. This helps people find the podcast. It helps people know this is a good place to go. And we would really, really appreciate it, as it helps us continue to bring on incredible guests and share incredible content for you to listen to.